3 exclusive bosses, 74 added items, a completely different currency, and a completely new game mechanic. And yet, not a lot of people are talking about it. There was hype when it first came out, and then afterwards, it almost felt like nobody cared. So today, let's fix that. Let's talk about the Old One's Army, the entire summoner subclass that's primarily supported by it, the 8 unique armor sets that are surprisingly quite powerful in interesting ways, and of course, how it all works. This is a guide and overview made by an average player like you that only really paid attention to this event recently. Let's begin. Before we talk about anything else, we first need to know how to start the event. To do so, we first need to kill an evil biome boss, the Eater of Worlds or the Brain of Cthulhu. This event cannot be initiated before that, unless you bring in items from another world, since beating them is the needed spawning requirement for the unconscious man to spawn into a world. He can be found anywhere, and once you talk to him, he will then turn into the Tavern Keep, which is an NPC that can move in if you have any valid housing. This guy is required, since it is only from him that you can buy the Eternia Crystal and the Eternia Crystal Stand, which is what's needed to summon in the event. Now, you'd think you can just place this thing anywhere to start the event, right? But nope. Here are the terrain requirements. The Eternia Crystal needs a flat surface plane to begin, a minimum of 60 tiles horizontally in each direction. If there is a height difference of 4 or more blocks, the event will not start. The maximum distance is 120 tiles horizontally in each direction. For the ceiling, it's preferable if you don't have one. But if you do, then it has to be 10 blocks apart from the floor. If you've tried to start this event and failed, these terrain requirements were probably the reason you were having problems. But enough with them, we know the rules, we followed everything the Eternia Crystal needed, and now all that's left for us to do is to start the event. Alright then. You've done it! The event has started. 2 portals appear, you can't place or break any blocks, and a legion of monsters from another realm are all coming to murder you. Great job! What do you do now? Well, first off, the Old One's Army event has a lot of anti-cheat systems. Basically, think of it as a reverse destroyer. One of these is the Creative Shock debuff, which this allows you from making any sort of changes to your world while the event is ongoing. Prevents you from placing blocks and breaking blocks, no matter how good your pickaxe might be. Actuators and bombs are still allowed, but the enemies will just phase through them to get to you. The enemies are also not affected by teleporters, not damaged by lava, and not slowed down by honey. So with all this anti-cheat, it's probably not a good idea to try to cheese this event, unless you're Mappy Gaming or something. So let's just go through this event normally, yeah? The event has 3 tiers of difficulty, which we will be covering later on. Each tier has multiple waves of enemies with the sole goal of destroying the Eternia Crystal. Your goal is to prevent this from happening, of course. Every enemy you kill will drop Etherian mana. 10 of these, you can summon a sentry, which will help you in defending the crystal. Throughout the event, you can gather more and more sentries to help you as the event gets harder and harder. And finally, at the end of the event, you will get your reward of Defender Medals, which is a whole new currency only used by the Tavern Keep NPC to buy better sentry weaponry and armor sets that buff them even further. The 3 tiers of difficulty of the event are at crucial points of game progression, with each tier having its own final boss. The first tier is simple, since it's at the pre-hard mode level. 5 waves with the final boss being the Dark Mage, a random old dude that summons random old dudes and uses magic to shoot stuff at you. The reward for beating them up? 5 Defender Medals. Oh god. The tier changes once you beat any of the mechanical bosses. Now, it has 7 waves, new and more difficult enemies with the final challenge being Shrek. He spits stuff at you, making you incredibly slow, also occasionally stomping on the ground, dealing area of effect damage. The reward is slightly better than the previous tier, it being 25 Defender Medals. And lastly, the tier will change once more as you defeat Golem. The third and final tier has 7 waves, reusing the previous final bosses as if they were regular enemies. The final challenge is Betsy. A red dragon that has over 95,000 HP. She will attack the crystal and the player by flying and charging, breathing flames and spewing out fireballs, dealing massive amounts of damage. She's also capable of calling forth Etherian wyverns to help her. The only way to end the event is to defeat her, whilst an army of enemies go through the portals to destroy the Eternia crystal. If you've amassed enough sentries, they can help you fend off the waves while you focus on Betsy, and then finally, you did it! You've defeated the most difficult tier of the Old One's army. An achievement and 100 defender medals is your reward. GG. Alright then, now that that's done, let's talk about something else. The unique items and boss drops this event has to offer. Let's start with the sentries. The unique summoner subclass that remains quite underutilized, probably since there are only 5 of them outside of the event. Sentries can be bought by the Tavern Keep NPC in exchange for defender medals. There are 4 kinds, with 3 tiers, with each tier only being accessible at the same progression points as the difficulty tiers of the waves. Each kind of sentry has its own pros and cons. The Flame Burst sentry shoots exploding fireballs with splash damage, decent range, and average damage and speed, but struggles against flying mobs and tankier enemies. Then we have the Explosive Trap sentry, which activates when enemies are near it. It has incredible firepower, but has the lowest range, slow speed, and no aiming. Now, for my personal favorite, the Ballista sentry. The Ballista sentry shoots bolts that pierces up to 4 enemies. It has the highest damage out of all the sentries, good range, and a 360-degree aim. Its slow speed and inaccuracy against fast-moving targets will hinder its performance though. And lastly, we have the Lightning Aura sentry. This thing summons a circle of lightning with a range of 17 blocks. It ignores defense and attacks quite frequently, and is also the best at crowd control. But it has the lowest damage out of everything else. It's up to you which you prefer, really. Your playstyle matters when choosing. But other than the sentries, the Tavern Keep also sells 8 unique armor sets. We honestly don't have much time to cover them all one by one with all the details, so we're just going to look at an overview. If you want to know more, you can always just try them out on your playthroughs. As an added bonus, all of these armor sets are multi-class, and can easily be used outside of the event. A lot of them also have more defense than the Stardust armor, which was pretty interesting to know. Honestly, experimenting with them and using sentries on boss fights can be quite fun. If you want to mix stuff up and surprise yourself, I recommend using them. And lastly, we have the boss drops. Honestly, some of these items deserve their own video, but I'm just gonna try to cramp them all in here anyways. Let's start with the Dark Mage drops. These are pretty simple, mostly just vanity and building materials, with the exception of the book mount. Pretty cool, but nothing real too amazing. Next up are the Ogre drops. These consist of 4 accessories that increase sentry slots, some pretty cool weapons, and vanity. These weapons are genuinely quite fun alternatives from the usual game metas, with one of them being insanely powerful, especially against segmented boss fights like the Destroyer. I recommend experimenting with them in a future playthrough if you want. And then, we have the Betsy drops. Betsy's drops are unique from the other 2 Old One's army bosses, since she has her own treasure bag when defeated in Expert Mode. Inside, you can find 30 to 49 extra defender medals, for genuinely amazing weapons that more people really need to use, and wings that rival the best wings in the game, especially in terms of horizontal flight. And that's it. Go subscribe. Schools of Pain. Hope to see you all in the next one. Bye.